What's in a name is the name of this video because we're going to be talking about Python names. This is one of those topics where once you get it, it sort of makes sense, but it can be a bit confusing initially, especially because names and objects, we often link them together, but they're not the same thing. Let me start by showing you an example of something you should not do when you're coding. Do not do this in your code. Print is equal to 5. First of all, can I do this? Yes, there's no error. But what's happened now? Let's assume I want to use print in a normal way. I want to print hello. I cannot. I have broken the print function. Now the print function is still there, but the name print, I've taken it away from our much beloved function, and instead I've given it to something else, in this case the integer 5. And the error message tells me that the int object is not callable. Callable means I can't put round brackets, parentheses after it. Functions and class names are usually callable because we can create instances, but integers aren't. I can only have one name print. In fact, I can only have one of any name in any session. Of course, I've only broken print in this particular console or REPL session. It still works everywhere else in Python. But in this particular session, I've taken the name print and assigned it to the integer 5. That means the function, previously known as print, no longer has a name. I can no longer access it. Let's look at a more sensible example. Let me create a name. I'm going to use these terms carefully now, right? So my numbers is going to be a name. It's underlined in red because it doesn't exist, but the equals is going to put that label onto something. And I'm going to create a list, 3, 10, 23. Now there are two things happening on this line. We are creating the object. The object is a list in this case, but it could be any other object. That's the object. I like to think of this as taking a cardboard box, and the object is what goes inside the box. That's the thing you want to store. But you're also putting a label on the outside of the box. In this case, my numbers. That's the name. The name my numbers is referring to the object, the list 3, 10, 23 in this case. Good. Let's import sys. There we go. And I'm going to use, let's print. Print works here now, right? Because we're somewhere else. So we're back to sanity. Print is okay. I'm going to, from sys, use get ref count. This will get the number of references, the count of how many references a certain object has. And I'm going to refer to, I'm going to use my words carefully here, the object which the name my numbers is referring to. So even though I'm putting name my numbers, what I really want here is the object that it's pointing towards. Let's run this. And we get 2. So first of all, why 2? We seem to only have one reference, but get ref count is a function. And I'm passing the object, the list with 3, 10, 23, I'm passing it as an argument to get ref count. That means while this function is executing, there are 2 references to the object. The original one, my numbers, but there's also the reference within this function. So it's like a temporary reference for the duration of the function. This means, this is a bit of a technicality, but it means that whenever we use get ref count, we will always get one more reference than the ones we really want, because we don't want this temporary reference. So whenever we get a value from get ref count, subtract 1 from it. That leaves us with 1 reference. Great. Let me create another name. Cool numbers. That's a name, and I'm going to make it equal to whatever object the name my numbers is referring to. So it's the same list, 3, 10, 23. This does not create a copy. I still have one box with one object inside, but now I've got 2 labels, my numbers or cool numbers. It's up to you, you have a choice. You can refer to the object with either of these 2 names. Let me copy that and paste it there. And the second time I've printed the return value of get ref count, I get 3. Remember, we need to subtract 1. That means there are 2 references, my numbers and cool numbers. That's great. Let me remove some empty spaces there. So what can I do next? I can delete cool numbers. Now, what does this do? It does not delete the object. It deletes the name. It's like I'm ripping the label from the box and throwing it in the bin. The object is still in the box, and in fact, it should still have one label. Let's find out. So I'm going to print getRefCount. I'm always using my numbers here because the name doesn't matter, it's the object that it's pointing to that matters. And you can see we've gone back down to one reference, 2 minus 1. Why? Because cool numbers, it was there for a brief period of time, but now I've removed the name cool numbers, but the object is still there. So you can see that delete does not delete the object. It deletes the name. Unless, we'll come to this in a bit. Let's create something else. Let me create groups of numbers. So another name, and this is going to be a list of lists. So for example, I'm going to say I've got a list. The first list in it is 1, 2, 3. Then I'm going to put my numbers, and then I'm going to put 10, 20, 30. So I've got a list, groups of numbers, which contains 3 other lists. One of them is the object I've already created. Let's just confirm that. Let's print groups of numbers. There you go, a list with 1, 2, 3, 3, 10, 23, and 10, 20, 30. So the question is, if I print sys.getRefCount my numbers, how many references do I have now? Before I run it, let's see whether I can work it out. We start off with 1 reference, my numbers. Then we add cool numbers, so we're 2. But then I remove cool numbers again, so I'm back down to 1 reference. How about line 12? I did not assign any other name to the list 3, 10, 23, but I still have another way of referring to it. I can get to the same object by saying groups of numbers, square brackets 1, for example. So even though I don't have a specific new name for that object, I still have a way of referring to it. That's an extra reference. So we've gone back to 2 references, my numbers and the second item in groups of numbers. So groups of numbers, square brackets 1, is also a way of referring to my original list. So this should give us 2 references. But remember, there's always going to be 1 more shown. And there you go. We've now gone up to 3. So the reference is not just the name that I give specifically to that object. It could be if I place that object within some other structure, as I have done here. And I promise you will come to this. Let's delete groups of numbers. So groups of numbers is this list of lists, if I can say it. The list of lists, I'm not referring to my numbers now, I'm referring to the entire list of lists, only has 1 reference. There's only 1 way of referring to it, groups of numbers. So when I delete that name, when I rip the label from the box and throw it in the bin, the box no longer has any labels. The reference count of this list of lists is 0. And that's when Python thinks there's no point in keeping this object in memory. Since you cannot refer to it, what's the point? Let's clear it from memory and make space for other things. And therefore, when I say delete groups of numbers, in this case, removing the name, which was the last reference, also removes the object. Before I finish, if you want to read more about this topic, one of my recent articles on the Python coding stack is What's in a Name. It talks about all of these topics. I talk about a few other things as well and go in a bit more detail. So feel free to go to the Python coding stack and read more if you want to. Of course, you can always subscribe to the Python coding stack to get all the articles. I'll also show you, I love creating the images for these, not those images, those are useful, the cover images using Midjourney. It's one of my hobbies these days. So there we go. That's Midjourney's take on what Shakespeare should look like, because I gave it a reference to What's in a Name to do with Shakespeare, and it thinks Midjourney that Shakespeare looks like that. Who knows? Maybe he did. I'll have more of these videos linked to some of the articles I've been writing in the coming days.